pharmaceutical sector is a major contributor to the cost of health. You know, if you look at about 40% of the cost of health is medicines. And the challenge here is, again, overpricing of these things, particularly when they are insurance covered. You know, so we need to look at this area where those people who are dealing with the industries, with the insurance, are not doing this. They are not overcharging patients, because that creates a problem of access. You know, when, for example, you may find patients are getting generics and being charged for brands. You are not going to do universal health care, or the medicines are very expensive. We have to rely on generics, which means we must control our market so that we have only the good medicines.
On average, Kenyatta National Hospital spends 750 million within every financial year for pharmaceuticals. It has been estimated that for our outpatient, close to 60% of their total costs that they incur within the hospital are due to pharmaceuticals, and for inpatients, approximately 50% of their inpatient costs are because of pharmaceuticals.
All of us have a right to quality, right? That quality doesn't differentiate between a rich man, a poor man, or middle class. Everybody deserves it. Medicines are used to treat diseases. If the medicines are not of quality, then you're really not treating diseases. And that's why quality is very, very important, not only in testing, but the way we do things in every aspect. The processes, how we work together, everything is built in, is very important. Yeah? Because lives depend on it. First of all, the difference between the originator brand and a generic is one fundamental thing. The originator product was actually discovered and formulated, etc., with the clinical trials, branded with their markups and put in. The generic is exact copy of that. Okay? The active ingredients, the formulations, the stabilities, everything is done. There is absolutely no difference. If you go to the UK decided that the generic way of prescribing was the most cost-effective way of giving medicines. So back in early 80s, there was a list of medicines which they had generic versions. And the generic versions come into place as soon as the patents expire. All originator products have a patent life of 10, 15, 20 years. As soon as they expire, generic manufacturers come and make it. So that's the difference. It's not a counterfeit. It's not a substandard. In fact, world over, generics is the way to go because it brings the cost down.
It would be very important that, especially for people who are accessing public medicines, they need to be informed that the role of the healthcare worker at every level should be to ensure that the medicines they are getting are of good quality. We need to differentiate between an originator, a generic, a substandard medicine, and possibly a counterfeit medicine. So it is important that at every level of care that we educate the patient on the various categories of drugs that are available, and also to emphasize the fact that generic does not always imply poor quality.
We've always said, look at India. Medicines are cheaper there. And let me not use the word cheap because it has a connotation people take as substandard. Affordable medicines, yeah? In the early 60s, pharmaceuticals were very expensive in India. What did India do? They started promoting local manufacturing and generics. And how did they do it? They told multinationals that if you want to sell to the people of India, then you put up a plant here. Right? So they close employment and everything, they control the transfer pricing, etc., and allow others to grow. At the same time, they did not respect patent laws. That meant that the Indian companies could develop these products during the patent windows. And that is how the Indian pharmaceutical industry grew. And with that growth, with companies growing, they pump in more money, they get US FDA approval, they start exporting. Bangladesh story is the same. In Kenya, we suffer from two things. And I am fully supportive of our President Uhuru Kenyatta on the two pillars of manufacturing and UHC. Why? Because even in WHO and African Union meeting, they have said to always encourage local manufacturing because that gives security. Also brings the cost down. We have noticed that the cost of medicines when you manufacture locally as to importation is far cheaper. Which does not mean, as other stakeholders will say, this is poor quality. It's not. Yeah? The second thing is that it makes sense in Kenya to manufacture because even if you look at the availability, you can have the affordable medicine, but it's no good if it's not available. If you look at the statistics and studies that I've done, you will find that there are more of local medicines available. And the reason is because we can bring in the raw materials, convert it, and push it to the market. That is the advantage. And that is why a lot of countries actually have local manufacturing.
In terms of the market size, small countries have a challenge in terms of manufacture. Quite apart from the question in terms of generics, you know, if you're going to manufacture generics because the products are off patent, then you have to look at the size of the market. You know, are you able to produce economically to be able to do, you know, a viable setup because it is expensive to manufacture. Now, Kenya has an advantage in East Africa because it has quite a number of the industry, about 35 manufacturing companies. Compared to the other East African countries, Kenya has actually produces quite a lot of generics. But it's still nothing compared to India because India, you know, is a huge population. And India managed to get itself in a position of becoming a supplier globally.
When you're thinking about universal health care, most of the countries that utilize one healthcare system or another insist on generic prescribing. Now, it is our insurance companies, and in this case, maybe we would look at the National Hospital Insurance Fund, that will be able to not only encourage the health providers to use generics in their prescribing, but also require that for any of the products that is dispensed to their patients who are covered by the fund, will recognize generics.
If they look at UK is full of generics. The only time they use originator is when the patents are there. And there is no substitute treatment for it. So I think that comes with education.
The variation even within among the generics in terms of cost is quite variable. What most countries do is that they have gone ahead to require the generic companies or companies that are manufacturing generics not to use any brand, or when you look at the packet from most of these companies, they are required to allow the name of the generic to be much, much bigger than the name of the brand, and therefore also encourage the prescriber to prescribe by a generic name. The other practice that has been used in most hospitals within Nairobi is to commit that they will have only one brand and 2 or 3 generics within their menu of the options that are available. And that is something that can be agreed upon either by the insurer or that is agreed upon by the various hospitals through their procurement processes. The other process that has been used in other areas is to use a price indicator guide, where the insurer can only give a range of pricing that is acceptable to it.
The job of the pharmacist is to ensure quality primarily, the safety of these medicines. But if not the pharmacist is there, because not everybody is dealing with the patient is a pharmacist. It's just too many. Everybody, like I said, is a pharmacist. So why is the patient going to go? And as it is now, in that environment, I want to be honest with you, it is reaching a point where pharmacists begin to opt out of that business. Why? Because it is not sustainable. Because it is not profitable if you do it ethically.
Now, in terms of talking about quality of medicines, why is the feeling that they're substandard, etc.? Is there something happening? I think, first and foremost, we need to differentiate between a good generic manufacturer and not a good generic manufacturer. Remember, recalls, if we look, it also happens with multinationals. Recalls are there, they're going to be. The question is, how often? And it is the quality management system that we've been put in place based on good manufacturing practice to reduce this risk, because there's always an element of human error. Yeah? So that's always going to be there. And when you have recalls, it's how quickly you can respond.
We have not had an incidence of recalling a product, because what we have made sure is that quality is established from the beginning. So we take measures during the processing to ensure that the end product does not fail the qualities. But in terms of raw materials, I can tell you there are those raw materials that we have rejected and they went back to the manufacturer.
As a consumer, it is a big challenge because it is very hard to know. For example, you're talking about now counterfeit products vis-a-vis genuine products. And the challenge is very hard to know the difference as a consumer. The marks that are used, the packaging that is used is very difficult to differentiate. So the onus really is on the regulator to ensure that there is strict adherence to processes of importation, strict controls at the borders, entry points, to ensure that you're not getting these products. And then again, most importantly, to control the marketing points, because that really was the challenge, the big challenge we have in this country, is that there's too many unregulated outlets there. So when people bring in these products through sources that may not be good sources, and then they bring into very many distribution points that are not the right, that do not have the right standards, then you have a huge challenge as a consumer to know.
We've stayed in the market and grown because we've used our strategic plans, etc., to see how we manage. We decided that we are going to enter areas where others haven't entered and started investing in technologies, investing in our plant. We didn't look at short term. Okay, if we put this money, we can't do this, government is not protecting us. We need to look beyond and forward. And so all our strategies were based on that. Timely deliveries, most important is quality. So when we look at things like headaches, a headache, you have it and over time it will go. The only reason you take a headache pill is you want immediate relief, correct? If you look at antibiotics, you can take an antibiotic, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's a question of time and depending how sick you are. But when you look at NCDs, which are medicines for hypertension and diabetes, any doctor will tell you that if the blood sugar level doesn't come into control or the pressure doesn't come into control over 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, There's either something wrong with his diagnosis or something wrong with the type of medicine is prescribed. So, having said that, it was important for Cosmos at that time to think that, look guys, let us worry about quality. Let us invest money in quality. And quality doesn't just mean instruments that do the testing, nice building. It means the culture of the people. Because when you go into the manufacturing, there is also the quality aspect of human input also. So that was very, very important. And we thought that this will at the end of the day pay. So I think, when you look at that and you look at the imports that are coming and people also are not very happy with Indian and Chinese imports, that's where you start gaining things.
You realize what you're manufacturing, there are pharmaceutical medicines. They are going to be taken by human being. So we cannot be able to release the product to the market without testing. See, there's a product. You can see some white.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because initially it was a tablet, then after the pending, it means it is dissolving. The quality of the medicine that is going to the market must be established and must be ascertained. So that is why it's very, very important that we have a laboratory like this. You realize also in terms of raw materials, we normally get the raw materials from overseas. In as much as they have been tested by the manufacturer at their places of site, we don't take it that the quality is good until we do our own testing. That is what you can be confident about. So basically how the lab is very important is because all the incoming raw materials must be analyzed, their quality must be established, and it must meet not only the local standards, it must meet the international standards. So that happens also for the manufactured products. Once we manufacture the product, that's our own product. We must be able to ensure what is the quality of this product that you're going to sell to the because I know maybe it's me who shall take the medicine, maybe I get sick.
Yeah, just there's some on that side.
Medicines are supposed to be quality in terms of being allowed into the country by being market approved. That means they are registered, supposed to be registered for approval for marketing in the country through a process known as registration of products. So what that's supposed to mean is that they have been assessed, they have been analyzed before they are marketed to ensure that they are right quality.
We are regulated by the government because there's an arm of the government whereby they are dealing with the pharmaceutical products, and that is called the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. There is the regulatory body in Kenya to be able to regulate the pharmaceutical medicines. So we follow under them. They are the ones who are going to do audits, and they are going to qualify us to be able to do the pharmaceutical manufacturing. And above that, we also have overseas auditors who are coming because mostly we don't only sell the product to the Kenya, we're also selling overseas. So the representative regulatory bodies of those countries are going to come and audit us as well.
And then beyond that, once they are approved for marketing, they're supposed to undergo constant market surveillance to ensure that whatever is marketed is consistently of quality as per the registration samples. So that is the way it should be. The question as to whether that happens all the time, there are issues of capacity to be able to look at the products always on the market, to make sure those who are marketing them are maintaining the quality, issues of which is done by the National Quality Control Laboratories. Then, of course, there is the other big problem of products that may come in on the market which may not necessarily go through the quality assessments. So that creates a problem as to what is really on the market. You may not always know what is on the market in terms of it being certified for quality. Because products do come from other routes, from irregular, unregulated entry, importation.
In my 30 years of experience being in the pharmaceutical industry, working for Cosmos as well as multinationals, that we need to separate the two things. One, we talk about substandard and counterfeit. We need to separate that out. Counterfeits are an imitation of a popular product. Now these tend to infiltrate through various means because our borders are porous, and we also know that people are enterprising and it's difficult to control. PPB is trying very hard. Then there's the issue of substandard. The substandards are usually coming from, in my opinion, outside Kenya. How are they coming in? Because there's so many manufacturing companies which have not been inspected or have not got that qualifications and they come in. It very much depends on what kind of raw materials you're buying, what kind of processes you're using in the operations. Remember, we're dealing with chemicals. Chemicals degrade. So how you process it, where you buy it from, it's all important.
If you don't sample the raw material or the product statistically and representatively, then no matter how you do the analysis, in terms of the output or the quality of the analysis is as good as sampling. So in our case, we are going to make sure that we are having representative sampling of all raw materials, of all finished product, because you also realize we cannot be able to test each and every tablet. So we are going to send to get a representative sample. So we must ensure that the sampling is done in the right way. Our testing is comparative. We are using standards. I must ensure where do I get my standards. And for that, we are following international standards. We are following standards from Britain. We are also following standards from the United States, that is. And when we get these standards, we are able to compare with our raw materials.
I think there are some policies in this country which are they've been put for the good reason, but I think they need to be adhered to. So let me give you an example. KEMSA buys 60% of the medicines required for the Kenyan market because it has to go to the public outlets, right? That means KEMSA is your biggest customer. And then we have a Public Procurement Act, which has guidelines as to how people tender and how tenders should be adjudicated. And there is a clause there that a local manufacturer will get a 10% preferential price treatment against an imported product. And the reason that was there is WTO put it to encourage local manufacturing, the growth of industry. But there is something which is not correct, which they say that, the preference is 15%, and for an importer who has a 51% shareholding as a Kenyan, gets a 10% preference. Now remember that importer is not investing in a big company manufacturing. He's not employing 600 people. He's employing at the most 40. So when we start looking economics, does it make sense to have put a factory? You might as well import. So those sort of things need to be thought of.
KEMSA was supposed to be a source of good medicine, at least for the government. But we continue to rely on the private industry for that. So the thing to do is regulate it, ensure quality, only quality products on the market, ensure that there is proper controls and surveillance to make sure that not everybody wants to get into medicines, because yes, people will make money, but yes, people are dying. Our medicines are losing control, they are losing effectiveness, efficacy because of misuse. Inappropriate use. Antibiotics are losing their efficacy, ability to deal with the disease, with the infections in particular. And as a country, yes, people want to do business, but not in this area. We should not allow this area to be contaminated by this bug that bites Kenyans, that money for anything. I mean, let us look at life, let us look at patients, and let us allow our professionals to support this.
Most of the healthcare is met by out-of-pocket within a setting like Kenya, whereas in most other places, the cost of healthcare is factored into insurance, and therefore they've got better methods of calculating the costs of the negotiated cost of medicines as an insurance package, as opposed to Kenya, where most of the cost will be met from out of pocket.
To be fair to the Kenyans, this is a result of the marketing that has been done over many years by the multinational companies. And obviously, when somebody brings in a brand product and it is patented for the 20 years for them to be able to make their money, to recoup their investment, then after that, the generics are supposed to come in and make the products affordable. But the multinationals want to continue that narrative that the brands are the better product. And they're in business to do that. Our job as professionals is to debunk this myth and to tell the public, no, a generic, if it is allowed into the market, is as good as a brand product. Unfortunately, again, if you're dealing with a market where the issue is to make money, right, and the professional has not that opportunity to operate in an environment where they can pass this message for the public to benefit from the more affordable products. You see, again, they continue to think that these are poor quality. They continue to pay more, and the whole question of access now becomes a problem.
And in the sense of a UHC system, I think there is a lot that needs to be thought of just beyond increasing NHIF, beyond just insurance companies. It needs to have a whole holistic involvement of everything. As I said, in Kenya, the budget per capita is $65 according to a 2015 study. The world average is $1,000. Now, if your medicines are going to be expensive, they're going to eat into that $65. Already it's very little. And the world average is $1,000. How are you going to match it? You're only going to match it if you start creating employments, people can afford, etc. And that's what we need to do. We need to look at how we can create employment industries, have self-sufficiency, protect our industries. Don't protect them if they're making substandard. I agree with that fully. Don't support them if they're making substandard. Yeah, we have to make the genuine players grow.